Great way of wasting time, guys. Good job. 9 words. Dripping with sarcasm. Delivered over team radio by a man who has won more world championships than almost anyone in the history of this sport. He didn't scream it, he didn't need to. By the time Lewis Hamilton said those words, the damage was already done. The podium was already gone. This wasn't the sound of anger boiling over in the moment. This was the sound of a 7-time champion looking back at the last 2 laps and realizing exactly how much they'd cost him. This is the story of how one afternoon in the Dutch sand dunes, the very last Formula One race Zandvoort will ever host, became the weekend Lewis Hamilton's patience with his own team finally cracked, live, on air, for everyone to hear. A champion under pressure. To understand why 9 words on a radio channel mattered so much, you have to understand exactly where Lewis Hamilton was standing before he ever climbed into the car that weekend. This was supposed to be the dream. The 7-time world champion, arguably the greatest driver of his generation, finally in red. Finally at Ferrari, the team every driver in this sport secretly wants to win for. It was the storybook ending nobody thought would actually happen. And for a while, it looked like it might just work. But storybooks don't account for the real thing. And Hamilton's first season in red hadn't gone the way anyone at Maranello had imagined. Heading into the Dutch Grand Prix round 12 of 23, Hamilton sat 3rd in the overall championship standings, 53 points behind championship leader Kimi Antonelli, 19 years old. Ruthlessly consistent, already the owner of 6 race wins on the season. The kind of dominant, ice-cold campaign that makes veterans nervous. 53 points isn't insurmountable. Not with 11 rounds still to run after Zandvoort, but it's not nothing, either. Every session now mattered. Every strategy call. There was no more room for wasted afternoons. And Hamilton, of all people, knew exactly what a wasted afternoon looked like. He'd said as much himself weeks earlier at the Hungarian Grand Prix, after a miserable weekend left him calling his own performance.
It's more at the end, lack of communication. I didn't know that I had someone coming.
That word had followed him through the entire summer break. A 7-time champion using that word about himself. It doesn't get more honest or more painful than that. So when Formula One arrived at Zandvoort, tucked into the dunes of a Dutch coastal town of just 17,000 people, Hamilton wasn't only chasing points, he was chasing proof. To his team, to his rivals, maybe even to himself. And unlike a rookie still learning the sport, Hamilton knew precisely what a fully functioning championship-winning operation looks like from the inside. Because he'd spent over a decade living inside one at Mercedes. He knew what it felt like when a team executed a strategy call without hesitation, without internal politics getting in the way of the result. That knowledge made every small stumble at Ferrari's sting just a little bit sharper than it might for someone who'd never known anything different. A circuit saying goodbye. There was something else hanging over the weekend too. Something bigger than any one driver's championship fight. This was the last Dutch Grand Prix, ever, at least under the current agreement between the promoters and Formula One. No government funding, no corporate safety net, just a small town and a circuit that had fought for years to return to the calendar, only to lose its spot again to simple financial reality. Sporting director Jan Lammers wrote an open letter to fans that morning, talking about memories enduring, about stories living on in the dunes long after the cars had gone quiet. It was, by every account, an emotional atmosphere. A farewell tour for a circuit that had delivered chaos and drama in equal measure across its short modern history ever since it returned to the calendar back in 2021. And fittingly, Zandvoort had one more chapter of chaos left to write. This time, though, the headline wouldn't be about the home fans in orange or their local hero. It would be about the man in red. A weekend of 2 cars. It didn't start well, but it also didn't start the way most people remember it now. Zandvoort was a sprint weekend, which meant the entire schedule was compressed into a shorter, sharper format. Just one single practice session on Friday morning, no safety net, no second chance to dial in the car. And in that hour, Hamilton actually looked comfortable. Kimi Antonelli topped the times, but Hamilton wasn't far off. And for a moment, it genuinely felt like Ferrari might have unlocked something at a track that, on paper, should have suited their car's characteristics. Then came sprint qualifying, later that same Friday afternoon, and everything changed. Ferrari made what they called subtle adjustments between the 2 sessions. Small tweaks, nothing dramatic on paper, but on track, it was a different car entirely. It was not a good session, Hamilton admitted afterward. Practice felt good. We made subtle adjustments to the car, but when we got into qualifying, it was a completely different car. The result? 7th on the grid for Saturday's sprint race. 7th, while teammate Charles Leclerc qualified 3rd, just off the front row, agonizingly close to pole position. Same team, same base car, 2 wildly different Friday afternoons. Saturday morning brought the sprint race itself 24 laps, the first points on offer all weekend. Hamilton fought hard, But a car that had gone missing in qualifying stayed missing in the race. No fairy tale recovery. Just confirmation that something was still genuinely wrong underneath him. But Ferrari had one more session left to try and fix it Saturday afternoon's qualifying. The one that would actually set the grid for Sunday's Grand Prix. And working through the data overnight and between sessions, they found something. Hamilton was almost stunned by the turnaround. "We changed a lot of things, but it doesn't really look that big," he said. "But the difference it makes in the car is unbelievable. Fifth on the grid for Sunday. Not spectacular by any stretch. But after 2 straight days of chaos and confusion, it felt like solid ground under his feet again." He allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. "I think our race pace was better," he said. "I think we'll probably be able to hold on to the guys up ahead at least. Strategy is going to be key." He had no idea just how right and how painfully wrong that sentence would turn out to be by the end of Sunday. Race day chaos Sunday arrived, and Zandvoort delivered one final, dramatic twist before saying its goodbye. Just as the cars rolled out for their formation laps, rain began falling over the dunes. Lando Norris held the lead from pole position, but behind him, the race was already unraveling before the first corner had even been reached. Hamilton made contact with Max Verstappen right at the very start. Tight, physical racing. No room for either driver to breathe. Verstappen was forced onto the grass, fighting just to keep his car pointed the right way. It turned out to be a preview of a far bigger disaster. Moments later, at the banked, treacherous final corner that has made Zandvoort infamous among drivers for years, Verstappen lost the rear of his car entirely on the damp surface and speared head-on into the wall. His home race finished before it had truly begun. Marshals raced to clear debris scattered across the racing line. The red flag flew, and for a while, Zandvoort's farewell threatened to be remembered for tragedy rather than celebration. There was no single obvious mistake to point to afterward. Just physics, a wet track, and a driver with nowhere left to go at the worst possible moment of his home weekend. The crowd, moments earlier roaring for their hero, fell completely silent. When the action resumed, it was Hamilton's turn to write his own chapter, and it started with real, patient racecraft. He'd fallen behind Leclerc off the original start, so he ran a longer opening stint than the cars around him, betting that fresh tires later in the race would matter more than track position early on. It was a calculated gamble, and slowly, it began to pay off. By lap 42, Hamilton had caught his own teammate. On fresher rubber, clearly faster, and running out of patience, he got on the radio, "I'm quicker than Charles. My tires are better." Ferrari heard him. They told Leclerc to pit and let Hamilton through. Leclerc didn't listen, not straight away. He held his track position for another full lap, ignoring the first instruction entirely, much to Hamilton's growing and very audible frustration back at the pit wall. It took a second, firmer order before Leclerc finally came into the pits lap 44, and even then, it didn't go smoothly. A slow stop. 3.4 seconds, well off the pace Ferrari's crew are usually capable of. Leclerc rejoined the race down in 6th place, finally dropping behind Hamilton at last. That's the moment the radio crackled with the line that would come to define the entire weekend. "Great way of wasting time, guys. Good job," not shouted in the heat of the moment, said afterward, once the whole slow, drawn-out sequence had finally resolved itself. A verdict, delivered with ice-cold sarcasm, not an outburst, and it wasn't the last thing Hamilton had to say that afternoon either. The race kept moving. With around 20 laps still remaining, Ferrari floated another strategy idea over the radio, a fresh set of medium tires. Hamilton, still stinging from watching Leclerc struggle on that exact compound earlier in the race, wasn't convinced. "It didn't look great on Charles. It's slower," he told his engineer. "But you guys have got the data, so figure it out, please." Ferrari left him out on track regardless, and his hard tires began falling apart badly. Hamilton was losing nearly 2 seconds a lap to the cars around him with every passing corner. Then, as the field jostled for position further up the road, Esteban Ocon stopped his car at turn 4. Virtual safety car. It was exactly the break Hamilton needed. "Are you using me as a guinea pig?" he asked pointedly, wanting to pit immediately. Ferrari brought him in under the virtual safety car for a fresh set of soft tires, the tire swap that finally gave him a real fighting chance in the closing laps of the race. And he used it. Hamilton charged hard in the final stretch, closing in fast on George Russell's Mercedes for what would have been his first podium finish in weeks. He got close, agonizingly close, but couldn't quite find a way past. Russell held firm. Hamilton crossed the finish line in 4th place, with Leclerc trailing just behind him in 5th. So close he could practically see it. Not close enough to actually touch it. In the moments right after the checkered flag, Hamilton's race engineer tried gently to soften the blow. Thank you, Lewis. A bit unlucky with Russell. He offered over the radio. Hamilton wasn't having any of it. We weren't unlucky, he shot back immediately. We lost time earlier on, and that cost us P3. It's a quietly devastating thing for a driver to say about his own team, live on the radio, moments after the race has ended. Not an outburst, not a tantrum, just a cold, precise diagnosis delivered by a man who spent over a decade inside the most efficient operation in the entire sport. Now watching his new team fumble a decision that should have taken mere seconds. Not 2 full laps and a disobeyed order from his own teammate. He made the comparison completely explicit afterward, pointing directly at what Mercedes had done. Just laps earlier that same afternoon, George Russell handing second place over to Kimi Antonelli, instantly, with no argument and no delay, engineering the best possible result for the team as a whole without a moment's hesitation. I want to win, Hamilton told reporters afterward. I'm here to win, and it is difficult when you're looking ahead and you see the 2 Mercedes drivers. They get the call and it's done. They execute straight away. They let Kimi by and let him get on with the race. I was on a different strategy. It's not the same here, and that's a little bit difficult, but we just have to take it. And the numbers from that single afternoon told their own brutal story. Kimi Antonelli's championship lead over second place swelled all the way out to 59 points. Down in the standings behind him, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton finished the weekend dead level on points with each other, but it was Russell who came out ahead, leapfrogging Hamilton into that second position entirely thanks to a wins countback. 2 race wins to Hamilton's solitary 1. A technicality on paper? Maybe. But a brutal one in practice? A rookie-turned-genuine contender now sitting officially ahead of a 7-time world champion in the standings. Which means, after Zandvoort, Lewis Hamilton isn't second in this championship fight anymore. He's third. This is Hamilton's first season at Ferrari, distilled down into a single brutal Sunday afternoon. Moments of real brilliance, the patient fight back through the field, the overtake on his own teammate, the raw racecraft that made him a legend of this sport in the first place, undercut again and again by small, avoidable, structural failures. A team still learning how to fully deploy the driver it fought so hard for so long to sign. It's genuinely worth sitting with how strange that sentence actually sounds. This isn't a small rookie outfit still feeling its way through a rebuild. This is Ferrari, the most storied, most decorated name in the entire history of this sport, with more resources and more institutional history than almost anyone else on the grid. And yet, weekend after weekend this season, the same exact conversation keeps repeating itself in different forms. 2 genuinely fast cars, 1 slow decision, and a 7-time champion left afterward doing the painful math on exactly what it cost him this time. Before he finally left the podium area that evening, Hamilton did one more thing. He turned toward the grandstands, toward that sea of orange that had shown up despite this not even being their own home heroes race weekend, and thanked them, sincerely, for the noise, for the memories, for years of Formula One hosted in a place that, by every cold financial logic, never should have worked in the first place. Zandvoort said goodbye to Formula One this particular weekend. And somewhere inside that goodbye, quietly, Lewis Hamilton said goodbye to another genuine shot at closing the gap at the very top of this year's championship. This season has actually been stepped back from just this one weekend, and a pattern starts to emerge, one that's been quietly building since March. This wasn't the first time this exact story played out for Hamilton at Ferrari. Look back across the season, and you'll find the same shape again and again. A genuinely strong car underneath him, a driver capable of finding pace nobody else on the grid can find. And then, somewhere between the garage and the checkered flag, a small decision, a delayed call, a moment of hesitation that turns a potential win into a distant memory of what could have been. There was Silverstone, where Ferrari had race-winning potential, and somehow found a way not to capitalize on it. There was Spa, where an unforced error on lap 1 turned a promising weekend into damage limitation before the race had even properly begun. There was Hungary, the low point of the summer, the weekend that produced that single damning word useless from a driver who almost never talks about himself that way. And now Zandvoort, a car that was genuinely, at times, the fastest thing on the circuit, fast enough to hunt down and pass his own teammate mid-race, undone by exactly the same kind of hesitation that's defined this entire campaign. It's not one bad afternoon, it's a pattern. And patterns in Formula One are far harder to fix than any single mistake. That's what makes Hamilton's radio message so much bigger than 9 sarcastic words. It wasn't really about Zandvoort at all, not underneath the surface. It was about every single one of those other weekends, all of that accumulated frustration finally finding its way out through gritted teeth and dry, biting sarcasm on an open radio channel for the whole world to hear. 12 rounds down, 11 left to run. 59 points now separate the championship leader from second place, and Hamilton isn't even the closest challenger to Antonelli anymore. That title now belongs to his own old teammate. It's not over, not mathematically, not with this many points still left out there on the table across 11 remaining rounds. But if Zandvoort proved anything at all, it's this. Ferrari's biggest problem this season was never really about raw pace. Leclerc's blistering practice times, Hamilton's determined late race comeback through the field, the underlying speed is clearly there, lap after lap, weekend after weekend. The real problem is decisions, seconds, trust between the pit wall and the cockpit, and how quickly that trust translates into action when it actually matters. And for a driver chasing an unprecedented 8th world championship at 41 years old, with time no longer an unlimited resource, those seconds might end up being the only thing standing between him and history. If you want to follow every twist of Hamilton's fight for title number 8, make sure you're subscribed, and I'll see you at Monza.